Last night, freshman California Congresswoman Katie Porter came out in favor of beginning the impeachment process against President Trump. Here's what Congresswoman Porter said here about impeachment 3 weeks ago. You're representing a formerly Republican district, possibly still Republican district. The last 50 years it's been a Republican district. Does that inhibit your thinking and your public statements about impeachment?
It does not. This is an issue about what we owe the American people. And I don't care who you vote for or what party you're registered in. You're owed a government that follows the law. You're owed a president who respects our Constitution, who respects the checks and balances in our democracy.
And last night, in a video announcement to her constituents released on Twitter, Congresswoman Porter said this.
I've spent hours reading and analyzing the Constitution, articles written by leading scholars, and the 200-year history of our democracy and its system of checks and balances. After weeks of study, deliberation, and conversations with Orange County families, I've decided to support an impeachment investigation of the president.
Joining us now is Representative Katie Porter, freshman Democrat from California. Congresswoman, thank you very much for joining us tonight. What brought you to this decision? I know you said in your video that you approached this decision reluctantly.
I really took my time to study the report. I've tried to do that with every issue, whether it's been thinking about how to approach a financial services issue, a consumer protection issue, a healthcare issue. I've tried to take the time to learn the facts, and that's really what I did in this case, is understand that the facts as set forth in Mueller's report show that there's substantial evidence that the president engaged in at least 4 acts of obstruction of justice, each one of which is a potential crime.
You are one of the new members who, in most of the political readings of the current situation, you're one of the people who Speaker Pelosi has been trying to protect from the impeachment decision because there is this political calculus that in swing districts like yours, this will be a very unpopular choice. This will make your own reelection more difficult.
I didn't run for Congress, and I don't come every week to Washington, D.C. to do what's easy. I come to do what's right. And so politics has no part in this kind of a decision. This is really about analyzing the law and the facts as they were gathered by the special counsel, and then doing what I think is right. So there may or may not be political consequences to this, but that can't guide my decision. That wouldn't be doing my duty to my constituents if I allowed politics to trump what I believe is right.
How much did you talk about impeachment during your campaign?
During my campaign, I almost never spoke about it unless directly asked. And at all times, I said the same thing, which is we have to allow Mr. Mueller to do his investigation. And
what about voters in your district who might think, oh, you know, she didn't say anything about it during the campaign, and now here she is doing something, making a big decision that she could have told us about during the campaign?
I really couldn't have shared this information until now, because what I'm doing is using the facts and the evidence that Mr. Mueller found in order to make my conclusion that we need to begin an impeachment inquiry. So I was not in Mr. Mueller's shoes. I didn't know what he was finding. And like the rest of the American public, I had to allow him to do his job. But when he comes forward and says that there are at least four counts of obstruction of justice, and there's substantial evidence supporting all 4 of those counts, then it's my job to pick up that evidence and make a decision, and that's what I've done here.
Let's listen to what another California member of Congress, Chairman Adam Schiff of the House Intelligence Committee, said about impeachment.
Regardless of how people come out in terms of whether this is the right thing at the right time, people do need to be aware that there's a perception that if we announce an impeachment inquiry tomorrow, things change dramatically, that suddenly witnesses like Don McGahn, who've been resisting coming in, are going to show up and say, OK, where do I testify? The Justice Department's going to open its files. None of that is going to happen. We are still going to have to go to court. If anything, the administration will dig in deeper because now we've gone to sort of DEFCON 5.
Your reaction to that?
I don't know what the president's reaction is going to be if we begin an impeachment inquiry. We've seen a really strong pattern of continuing to, in fact, obstruct justice and defy the rule of law. But my job is to do what is required and to move forward. I think it's very unfortunate if the president continues down this pattern. I very much hope that people will come in, they will testify, they'll provide the information that the House needs to make a decision. And in the meantime, I have lots of other things that I'm working on, including some things I hope to work with this president on, such as prescription drug pricing and transportation and infrastructure. I was really discouraged that the president said, so long as we are reading the Mueller report and doing our job of oversight, he's not willing to work with us on the substantive priorities and the problems facing the people of this country. I think that's really wrong.
Were you under pressure on this decision from one side or the other?
I think there's been a lot of conversations going on amongst my colleagues, and I've certainly been part of those conversations. But I think anybody who's seen me testify, or excuse me, anyone who's seen me with witnesses who are testifying before the House Financial Services Committee probably knows that I'm not very easy to push around. I like to listen, I like to learn, I like to research, I like to think, I like to deliberate. But ultimately, this is my job to represent the constituents of the 45th District, and I had to make up my own mind, and that's what I did here.
You're in the biggest congressional district in the Congress, of course, the California Congressional District. It has the most powerful leader of a congressional delegation who happens to be Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Has this made her situation more difficult? Did you speak to the Speaker before making your announcement?
Of course, I went and told the Speaker what I was going to do. That's very common. We do this with all kinds of issues, whether they're small or large. We always try to keep the Speaker informed. And I think, look, I think what the Speaker here is making room for each member to do their duty to their constituents and to this country. She's making space for each person to read the Mueller report, to ask questions, to talk with chairmen, to hear about the investigations, to see what the courts are deciding. So I view this as a form of leadership in the sense that she's giving us each the opportunity to reach our conclusion. But when I'd made up my mind, I felt I had a duty to be honest with my constituents about where I was.
And when you told the Speaker this was your position, what did she tell you?
She said that she respected that every person needed to do what they think is right. And I think that she's been very consistent in that response across different people who've had different responses and different approaches to impeachment. She's a very strong, confident leader, and she knows that people are sometimes going to disagree with her. They're sometimes going to get to certain places before she does, but she makes space for that, and that's her job. That's what makes her a terrific leader, is that she allows each of us to do our own jobs with our own constituents.
Congresswoman Katie Porter, thank you very much for joining us tonight and explaining this important decision that you've made. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.